Some crazy things happen in the third round of the FIDE candidate tournament. The first one, in the game of Gukesh versus Ian Nepomniachtchi, Gukesh with the white pieces, he was extremely low on time. He only had like 1 minute on the clock. And Ian had like 34 minutes, that is a lot more. The thing is, when you reach your 40th move, you get 30 minutes added to your time. And in this position, Gukesh went king to d2 and he got added the 30 minutes to his clock. The thing is, this is not Gukesh's 40th move. This is the 39th move and he got added all that time. So the arbiter came in explaining to the players what is going on. They have to reset the clocks and both players are extremely confused. Nepo starts complaining and then Gukesh starts complaining. Then Santa Claus comes into the picture as well, and they end everything with a good laugh. And once the clocks are fixed, now both players just play a couple more moves and they decide to end the game in a draw. And then on the other board, Hikaru Nakamura is playing the lowest rated player in the entire tournament, Nijat Abbasov, and Hikaru has to win. This is the clearest, easiest way he has to win and get back into the tournament, because yesterday he lost versus Vidit, so he is not doing great in the tournament. Abbasov with the white pieces and Hikaru Nakamura with the black pieces, and we have a slap defense, an exchange variation because they take the pawn on d5. Now both players decide to develop their knights, bishop to f4, pawn to a6, and bishop to g4 by Hikaru Nakamura, pinning the knight on f3. Pawn to h3, asking the bishop what is going on, do you want to take the knight, do you want to move back, and Hikaru decides to take the knight on f3. Queen takes f3 and pawn to e6 by Hikaru, rook to c1 by Abbasov grabbing the open file, and bishop to d6 asking for some trade. Abbasov is not very interested and he goes bishop to d3, and now Hikaru decides to take the bishop on f4. Queen takes f4 and both players castle here. And now we have rook to c8 by Hikaru, the queen goes back to f3 and queen to d6 connecting the rooks. Queen goes back to d2 and knight to e7 with the possible idea of pushing the pawn on e5. Queen goes to d2 now, and Hikaru moves the knight to e7, and notice that both knights are now on the 7th rank. Now we get knight to e2, pawn to g6, and both players now exchange every single one of the rooks. The knight goes back to c6, knight to b3 by Abbasov, and queen to b4 by Hikaru Nakamura, and Hikaru's asking for some queen trades. Queen takes b4, knight takes b4, attacking both the bishop and the pawn on a2, so they have to go bishop to b1, getting the bishop out of danger and defending the pawn on a2. The knight is not doing anything on b4 anymore, so it simply goes back to c6. King to f1 and pawn to b6, restricting the way of this knight a little bit. Now the bishop goes back to d3, now attacking the pawn on a6, and Hikaru goes knight to b4, defending the pawn, attacking the bishop, and attacking the pawn on a2. Bishop b1, and both players now repeat moves 3 times. And here they call the arbiter to confirm that this is a threefold repetition, because by FIDE rules you cannot agree to a draw before move 40, and this is only move 29. This rule applies unless there's a stalemate or a threefold repetition, which is what happened on this game. So they just call the arbiter to confirm that this game is over and they don't have to keep playing. And now the only decisive game of the night, Vidit versus Praggnanandhaa, the two Indians, Vidit with the white pieces and Pragg with the black pieces. Remember that Vidit won yesterday versus Hikaru Nakamura and Pragg lost yesterday versus Gukesh. In this position, Praggnanandhaa goes rook to e5, putting pressure on the knight on a5, and everything was doing relatively okay, everything's equal up until this point, because Vidit goes pawn to b4, and that's kind of a bad inaccuracy because you're allowing Pragg to go pawn to g5, and that g-pawn is just gonna keep running. Look at it, it's not stopping for anything. Knight takes b7, and not even king takes b7 or queen takes b7, but instead pawn takes f2 with an intermediate check. Now you have to take care of that, and then you can take the knight on b7. Vidit goes queen to f3 asking for a queen trade, but now Pragg decides to double up on the g file, rook to g5, queen takes b7, king takes g7, and you will be losing one of these two pawns, either the g2 pawn or the pawn on h5. Vidit decides to sacrifice the g pawn, rook takes g4, rook to e6 attacking the pawn on h6, but now Pragg is going after the pawn on h5 and there's no way to stop that. And now Vidit is down 2 pawns, so you just have to exchange a couple of rooks and it will be game over. Rook to d7 by Vidit, king to c8 attacking the rook, which goes to e7. Rook to e5 looking for a rook trade, and it looks like the rook is escaping, but you can simply go rook h to f5 check, and now the king has to go to the g file, and then you will be able to go rook to g5, trading the rooks, and there's simply nothing to do when you're down 2 pawns in this position. So in this position, Vidit resigned the game, and Praggnanandhaa has won his first candidate's game ever. In the game of Alireza Firouzja with the white pieces and Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces, the game was a flat line the whole time up until the end, where they decided to repeat moves and end the game in a draw. If you liked the video, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications, and I will see you tomorrow in the next round.